Okay, everyone, we're going to go ahead and get started. Great. Well, welcome. Thank you for coming to Getting Connected. My name is Carrie Brown, and I'm a project manager with the City of Austin Art and Public Places program. And I'm really glad that you're here today. Thank you for coming to this presentation. I've been with the city for about 5 years, but I've been in public art for about 15, so I've worked with programs in Arizona and Southern California before coming here to Austin. So hopefully I've got some good information to share with y'all about creating a proposal for artwork. So how many of you have applied for a public art commission or maybe a grant opportunity? Yeah, a few of you? Good. Okay, so some of the information that I'm going to share with you today might be familiar territory, but hopefully by going a little bit deeper and kind of giving you the perspective from the administrator, you'll get some new tips that can help you hone in on your proposal and your application process. So let's get started. Okay, so I alluded to this in the question I just asked you, but just wanted to start off by saying there are a number of ways to realize your art projects, and I'll be speaking primarily about public art commissions, just that's what I know best, but I think a lot of what I'll be talking about is really applicable to applying for an artist residency or applying for a grant, either through the city or maybe a foundation, as well as proposing a donation or a loan to a city or an organization. So hopefully a lot of what we'll talk about really could be applicable to those different types, but like I said, I'll be focusing primarily on public art commissions. So what we're going to go over today, more specifically, I want to touch upon the artist selection process as well as the design review process, just to kind of give you the big picture, top-level overview of what that looks like. So hopefully that kind of helps you understand all the little bits and bobs that we'll talk about as we go through submitting an application. And then we'll get into the details about applying for requests for qualification. So this is where you're submitting examples of your past work. And then get into developing a proposal. Now that can come out in a couple of different ways. One would be during an interview where you may be asked to present a conceptual idea. That might be when you're applying for a request for a proposal where you're right off the bat proposing an artwork along with a budget and materials that you plan to use. Or that could be when you're under contract, you've won a commission, and now you're developing a proposal for permanent artwork. So we'll talk a little bit about what all those mean, and then I'll share a few resources with you all, and then we'll have time for questions. So first, the artist selection process here on the top level. With all of our public art commissions, we assemble an independent jury. This jury is made up of art and design professionals who have expertise related specifically to the project that we're working on. This is really typical of other public art programs across the country, as well as grant applications as well. Typically, an independent jury is assembled to review all of the applications. That jury then makes recommendations to the Art and Public Places panel, which is our program's citizen advisory board. This is a group of art and design professionals that we meet with monthly, and they review and approve virtually everything that we do. So that recommendation goes to them. Then from there, the Art and Public Places panel makes a recommendation to the Arts Commission. The Arts Commission you may be familiar with is one of many commissions within the city that's appointed by City Council. And then depending on the size of the budget, the project may also go to City Council to approve that contract. One small caveat, we work very closely with the Art and Public Places panel, and we really get into the weeds with them. Typically what happens when we get to the Arts Commission and City Council, what they're really approving is that the process was followed, so that our program process and guidelines has been followed, and so that's what they're approving. And then of course Council gives us authority to negotiate a contract. So that's kind of top level how we select an artist. There are a number of different ways that we can select an artist. I won't go into too much detail about that, but certainly if y'all have questions, we can come back to that later on. And then the design review process. So this is after you've been awarded a commission, whether it's for a temporary installation or a permanent commission. That's where I really step in. So I'm a project manager. Somebody like me should really be your best friend. It's my job to help you through the process. It's my job to set you up for success. It's my job to troubleshoot and really work through some of the issues that might come up while you're developing your project. So I'm kind of stop number one. Then as you get into the project, you start working with some of the project stakeholders. So that could be other city staff. For example, if you're proposing a project in Zilker Park, we're going to work with park staff. That could be a community group, for example, Friends of Zilker Park. And so it really kind of depends on the project who is engaged, but certainly, again, I'll help you work through that as a selected artist. And then once you get a little bit further along, you start to engage structural engineers. We have all of our projects go through a conservative review to make sure that we are using durable materials and methods of fabrication so that the artwork lasts. And of course, there may be permits associated with that. And then once we kind of work through all of those details and get all of our ducks in order, then we come back to the panel and the Arts Commission to review and approve the design itself. So I've kind of oversimplified both of these processes. Sometimes they go back and forth a little bit, sometimes they go in circles. And anyway, it's just to say, again, top level, kind of give you that basis for how these two different processes work and how they might relate to applying to a project and also proposing artwork. So as with really any application, these are the four main pillars of what you're putting together. First, your letter of interest, your resume, professional references, and then images or videos of your work. And so I'm just going to pick apart all these a little bit, and then we'll get into some examples. So first, your letter of interest. Why are you interested in this project? We want to hear that. Talking about your relevant experience, how that applies for this particular project. What are the goals that are listed in the request for qualifications, and how do you respond to them? What makes you drawn to them? And last but not least, don't forget to put your name and your contact information on your letter of interest. We currently use an online application system called publicartist.org, and as you apply, you have an account, we see your name, but as we're going through the review process, sometimes it's a little bit tricky to search through your materials to find out who you are. So it's really important just to be very clear right at the get-go with your cover letter and include that information there. And I'll show you a screenshot from Public Artist. I'll talk a little bit more about that in just a second. Your resume, again, look back at the RFQ that you're responding to. There may be page limits. And also don't be afraid to tailor your resume to the particular project that you are applying to. I mean, this is sort of basic information, but always keep in mind that there may be hundreds of applications that the jury is reviewing, and you really want to put your best foot forward and include the most relevant experience on your resume. Images and videos, this is probably the most important part of your application. This is where we start to see who you are as an artist. Again, look back at the RFQ to see if there are any particular specifications. Typically for our calls, we ask that you submit 10 images. You may have only completed one public art project. Don't feel obligated to include 10 images of that one public art project. We really want to see your body of work. And that might be gallery installations, that might be temporary installations. Maybe you do have a permanent public art commission. We really want to see that body of work. And of course, there's going to be some editing and some tailoring to the project. I can't imagine that you could showcase your entire body in 10 images, but just to say, don't be afraid to really show that breadth of your work. Also, it's really good for us to see some in-context images as well as detailed images if that's important to the project. Just think about how can one single image communicate your project and really demonstrate the depth of the work that you're working on. And then the last bit I'll mention about this, well, actually two things. One, we also ask that you include information about each image. So this would be the date in which the work was developed, where it's located, who commissioned it, what was the budget, and then a brief description. This really helps us, again, just to understand another level of your work so that we can really make informed decisions as we go through the selection process. And then the last little bit, just specifically about videos, again, thinking about who's reviewing, who the audience is, and keeping in mind that there may be several applications that we're looking through, maybe even hundreds. So we always recommend videos be anywhere from 30 to 60 seconds at most, and really only include a video if it helps to demonstrate your particular project, so that you can, again, really showcase your body of work. And then last but not least, professional references. Just make sure that you're including people that really can speak to your professional work. And again, that doesn't have to be somebody you've worked with in the public art field. We really just want to know how you are meeting deadlines, staying on budget, things of that nature. So really anybody that's worked with you in a professional manner. And don't forget to spell check. Typos happen all the time. There may even be a typo in my presentation here, but don't forget to take that last second before you hit submit, go over it again, maybe have somebody else look at it. We see that, and we want you to put your best foot forward, and so don't forget to spell check. Okay, so this is a screenshot from publicartist.org. This is an image of what I or a jury member would be looking at as they're looking through your application. So you can see on the left side of the screen is kind of the navigation pane where you can see all the images that were submitted by this artist. There's a link for the letter of interest, the resume, the references. This is where we can really look at everything. But I wanted to show this image so you can kind of see what we see. And you can see that it's important to show this detailed information because we don't have a separate sheet that describes what all these images are. It's built right into the images. So when you're uploading the images, plug that right in. And this is specific to publicartist.org. This is what we use for our program currently. But again, this is fairly typical with other application systems that other public art programs use, even other granting organizations use. And so just be mindful of that as you're plugging stuff in, because a lot of times this information gets left off. And then so we're having to just kind of guess and see what we've got in the image and do our best from there. But having this extra information is very, very helpful. So that's just to say, this is kind of what we see. One other thing I'll add, typically the jurors are looking at this information online by themselves initially. We do a pre-review, then we get them together in the room and we go through everything again. So when we're in the room together, it's a little bit quicker because they have that previous knowledge of looking through your application. And at that point, we do look at images only, and we'll do kind of like a refresher and click through. But again, as the administrator, I'm kind of managing that review process. I've got all that information with me and I can share that as we go. So it's very key to have that information about your work. And then just really quickly, a quick plug for what we've got going on right now. Some of you may be familiar with the People's Gallery over at City Hall. We currently have that RFQ open, so you can apply for that now. That RFQ is slightly different. It doesn't use publicartist.org, number one. And number two, you're actually submitting work that you would like to show in the City Hall gallery. So slightly different than what our process is, but again, a lot of the things that we just touched upon are applicable to that particular application. So check that out. And then on the left is just a screenshot from our program's website. You can sign up for our newsletter there. We have a newsletter as well as the Cultural Arts Division has a newsletter. Either one will keep you up to speed on what is coming up. And a couple of ones that we've got coming out, we have an RFQ for Go Valley Pool. And we have our RFP process, which I'll come back to in a little bit, for our Tempo program, which is our temporary installation program. And then we have another RFQ coming out for Montopolis Rec Center. So keep your eye out for that. If you're not on our newsletter and you're interested in hearing about those projects, please do sign up. And you can get to it at austincreates.com. Okay, so moving on to the notion of presenting a conceptual idea. So you've gone through the application process and you've been selected as a finalist. That is really great, and you should feel really good about that because a lot of these opportunities are very, very competitive. And so like I said, we may be looking at hundreds, and if you're in the top 5, that is really awesome, so feel good about that. But what does it mean to present a conceptual idea during an interview? So again, this is our process specifically, but it is fairly typical of other processes around the country. First, you would likely attend what we call a finalist orientation. So you would get together with myself or whoever is managing the project, as well as other city staff who may be working with the architectural team to design the new facility, whatever it might be. This is an opportunity for you to get to know the project a little bit better, and maybe even have the meeting at the site itself or visit the site separately. Then from there, of course, you're going to spend a little bit of time thinking about possible materials, what you might want to do for your project, maybe visiting the site again, and then moving into your presentation. And I just want to make a point to say, I do think it's important to include information about your past work and about your practice in general in your presentation. You shouldn't assume that everyone knows your work very well. This is really your opportunity, again, to showcase not only who you are as an artist, but who you are in your body of work and how this particular project might expand your body of work. So we want to hear that. But then, of course, leaving time for your actual conceptual idea. And then I just want to make a note as well that at this stage, the jury is selecting an artist, not an artwork. So this notion of presenting a conceptual idea is really a tool to help the jury make a recommendation. It may very well be that conceptual idea comes to fruition and you build that. But it may also be that once you get into the project a little bit more, you might switch gears. So it's really kind of a tool for us to help select an artist, and that's why you don't go into as much detail at this stage as you might for other stages, like a proposal. A few tips: make sure you show up on time for your interview. That's, interviewing 101, but I just put that up there. An interesting story, I had an experience recently where I was interviewing 5 artists. They were 5 finalists for a project, and one of the artists wasn't there yet, and I was getting a little nervous that she was running late, maybe stuck in traffic, and so I snuck out of the room and I called her up, and she had completely forgotten. And honest mistake, it happens, life gets in the way, and I said, "Can you get here right now?" Luckily, she was close by and she was available, and she got there in about 10 minutes, and I told her, just take a deep breath, everything's okay. We'll go through the images you submitted in your application, but she didn't have a presentation with her, so we weren't really going to see a visual of her conceptual idea, but she had already thought about it, and so she came in, collected herself, and she actually did a really good job. I think one thing that really helped her is that she was able to speak about her work in a very articulate way, and because she had thought about what she might do for the project, she was able to verbally express that. And funny enough, she was selected for the commission, so I don't recommend coming in late and forgetting about it. However, I think it just goes to show that being prepared and being ready to do that can still get you the commission even if you're a little bit late. And then also just be mindful of how long your presentation is. As I said, that day we were interviewing 5 people, and we also have questions that we are going to ask of you. So you're covering information about your past work, you're talking about your conceptual idea, but we also have questions for you, so make sure you stick to that time. And then I already mentioned, don't assume that the jury is really well versed on your work. Please do take the time to talk about your practice and include that in your presentation. And then also just be very clear and concise about your conceptual idea. I have a couple of examples that I'd like to show you. So these are 2 projects. These are the 2 artists. One is an artist team, one is a single artist that were awarded a commission through their interview and presentation of conceptual idea. And so these are kind of 2 ends of the spectrum that I just wanted to share with you. The image on the right is a hand-drawn sketch by Judd Graham. He's doing a series of handmade bollards for us over on 2nd Street near the new Central Library. And he presented this concept that kind of outlines a little bit about the dimension, the material he's going to use. The image there is a snapshot of the material that he used on another project, so showing that he's familiar with this process, and this is how he would like it to apply it in this context. I've got a little bit from his letter that I just wanted to share with you as an example, and then we can come back to this with another example that I have further down in the presentation. So just quickly, Judd said, "My goal is to create bollards that are highly tactile and sculptural, enhancing the street architecture with handmade forged steel bollard sleeves that are uniformed in form with varying differences in textured similarities. The bollards will be easily recognized for their function, but upon closer inspection will be appreciated for their handmade qualities and textural feel. So you can get a sense where, you know, he's describing kind of casually the materials he's using and how it fits into the space, and you can see how he's sort of thinking about that juxtaposition, which was really helpful. He goes on in his letter to talk a little bit more about this material and his experience using this material, and again, how he would apply it in this context. And that was really a great way to very clearly describe what he was going to do, or what he was thinking about for this particular project. Now, I'm going to show you a video. Give me 1 second here. And this is a proposal that was presented by Chris Gannon, Chadwick Wood, and Brockett Davidson, who were selected for a commission that's associated with a wayfinding project happening in downtown. And I'm just going to play this, and then we'll come back to the explanation of that. I'm just going to play a few seconds here. Or not? Maybe not. I just played this. Hold on, give me 1 second. I'm going to try one more thing. Okay, if this doesn't work, we'll just move on, but cross my fingers. I'm not feeling too confident about this. Okay, well, the point I was trying to make with this video is to say, you know, they're sort of on the other end of the spectrum where they, okay, gotcha. Okay, where they created a video for their conceptual idea, and that sort of seems like above and beyond what might be expected of you, and that is definitely the case. However, for their particular project, it really made sense to make a video because it was really the best way to communicate their idea to the jury. And so the point of showing you both of these is just to say there's no right or wrong way to present a conceptual idea. Really just think about what is the best medium for you to communicate what you want to do. It could be a hand drawing, it could be a material sample that you have, or it could be a video if you have those capabilities. It really just depends on what you're proposing and what is the best way to communicate that. Let me switch this off. Okay, so moving on to requests for proposals. So again, the 4 pillars of your application still apply: your letter of interest, your resume, references, images and videos of your past work. But in this case, you're also including an artwork proposal. And so I'm just going to go into a little bit more detail regarding the letter of interest. So again, all of these 4 things apply that we went over before, but what you're going to be including is information about what you're proposing. So now, hopefully, as I go through this, you'll see the difference between a conceptual idea that you might do in an interview and actually submitting a proposal that has a lot more detail. What you're going to be including, of course, is a description of your proposal, what it is that you want to do, what is your conceptual statement about the work. You'll be looking at feasibility issues. Likely you'll be submitting a budget in a form that's part of the application. So you'll be thinking about how much things cost. You may be getting some quotes. You may be talking to some fabricators if you need some assistance making the work. And you're also going to be talking about the connection to the site. Why do you want to do this project here in this place? And how does that relate to your work as a whole? And of course, don't forget to spell check. Again, simple tool that often gets overlooked. Sure.
Are you saying that you do the first part again, what's in black here, and then you add what's in red, or is the second, when you're doing the proposals, it only what's in red?
You're doing both. You're adding to it, and it really kind of depends on what's outlined in the request for qualification. So, in the request for proposals. You may be asked to submit a letter of interest where you be addressing all the things in black, but you may also be asked to submit something separate that's specific to the proposal, or it becomes just part of one narrative document. So again, look back at what you're responding to and what those parameters are there. But yes, it's everything. 'Cause at the end of the day, we are looking at your proposal. We are making recommendations based on what you're proposing, but we still want to know who you are as an artist. We want to see your past experience. We want to know that you're able to pull off what you're proposing. So that's why all that information is still important.
How long should a letter of interest be or a page count?
That's a great question. So how long should a letter of interest be? Typically, we like to say 1 page. So that we can, get through all of our applications and give everybody a good amount of time reading through those letters. When you're responding to requests for a proposal, that might be a little bit longer because there's kind of another component to that letter. But typically, around 1 page is a good rule of thumb. Okay, so this is an example of a proposal for a temporary artwork. This is through our Tempo program that I mentioned earlier. This is a proposal by Teruko Nimura, and what you're seeing here is a little bit more specific information. So she has a site plan that says this is exactly where I want to put it. This is the shape I'm going to be putting it in. You can see on the left there, she has dimensions of how tall all of the sculptures are going to be. This is how I'm going to install the work. And then on the top right, there's a reference image there. She's also submitting budget and things of that nature. I just didn't include it here on this slide. And I just wanted to share a little bit from her letter of interest. So you can kind of see, in comparison to Judd's letter, it goes into a little bit more detail in terms of the conceptual idea for her project. So I'm just going to read a little bit from her proposal. So 1800 Lucky Cats is a large-scale sculptural installation for the Austin Animal Center consisting of 1800 slip-cast ceramic Japanese Lucky Cat figurines. Each 4-inch cat will represent 10 of the 18,000 animals the shelter serves every year, a staggeringly large number that is difficult to actually comprehend. I would like to raise awareness for the truly impressive task it is to run the largest no-kill shelter in the United States, where lost and surrendered animals are accepted regardless of age, health, species, or breed. By confronting the viewer with a visual representation of even 1/10 of this number in mass and tangible space on the front lawn of the property, I hope to elicit an understanding of the sheer volume of lives saved and garner more support and resources for this noble institution. So again, you're getting a little bit more in depth of her conceptual idea. Of course, in her letter, she goes into a lot more detail in terms of how things will get installed and how they'll get deinstalled and things of that nature. But again, just to kind of show you the comparison between a proposal versus a conceptual idea. So we're kind of going into that next level of detail. Okay, so moving on to kind of our last phase here, and this would be sort of our typical public art commission. You've gone through the selection process, maybe you did an interview, maybe you submitted a conceptual idea, and you've won the commission. And now you are under contract, and we are going into the design phase of the project. And so what you see here on the screen is a snapshot from an image that we have in our artist resource guide, which I'll come back to in a little bit, that kind of outlines what this process is. And so this is starting from the design. Once you have your contract and you start to dig into the project and develop a concept. So you're meeting with the project team, that might be the architect, other city staff, who's ever involved in developing the project. You're getting a really good understanding of what the project is, what are the parameters for your opportunity, and starting to explore those options. Of course, you'll spend some time researching materials, researching the site, getting to know the community perhaps. There's a lot of times where we have community outreach. And so you're kind of going back and forth. Again, remember that your Art and Public Places project manager is your point person, your go-to person, somebody you can troubleshoot ideas with. You have questions, we're your first point of contact to really help you navigate some of those more complex issues. And then you kind of go into what we've got marked as approval milestones. And with the Art and Public Places panel, a lot of times we'll go to them sort of midway through the design to get some initial feedback from them, and then that gets incorporated into the design as well. You'll also start engaging with a conservator. He'll be looking at the materials that you're using, how you're making them, how you're installing them, again, ensuring that everything that you're doing is durable and will last. And then you come back to getting ready for your final design. So this is your final proposal for artwork, the most detailed you're going to get. presenting a budget with bids. You may have contracts executed with subcontractors that are helping you make it or helping you install it. You have a detailed installation plan that coordinates with the general contractor schedule for the actual construction project. You've researched permits, things of that nature. And then you're presenting that back to the Art and Public Places panel as well as the Arts Commission. And again, all of the things that we've already talked about apply here as well. You want to make sure that you're clear and concise and you're developing images or models or material samples that really help communicate what you want to do for this project. And again, it's my job to help you through all of that. We want to set you up for success. We want you to be able to get this to this approval stage and get the approvals that you need to move forward. So if you're thinking this right now, it's okay, fear not. You know, I'm here to help you through this process. It's not always a linear process. It can be very nuanced. It really depends on what the project is, who the department is, who are the community members, and we'll work together to develop a plan to help you navigate that. At the end of the day, we've selected you for your expertise. We want to see your project realized, and we want to see your project succeed in the years to come. So it's our job to help you through all of that, so don't fret. Okay, so I'm just bringing up here the visual that I showed earlier, kind of coming back to the design review process. Again, just kind of top level to see that process as you go through developing and then getting the approvals for your work. But I just wanted to touch upon the contract language. So before we were talking about requests for qualifications and requests for proposals and making sure you're looking at what those parameters are, what's being asked of you, what do you need to submit, when do you need to submit it by. The contract is kind of the next level of that. It's really functioning as the same thing. What are your deliverables? What is expected of you? When is it expected of you? When is it expected for you to deliver these things? And so I've just listed a few things that are typical of our contracts. A narrative, describing the work, having a conceptual statement, talking about how it's going to be installed, talking about how it complements the architecture or responds to a community need, whatever the project parameters might be. Of course, spell check that narrative. Your visuals, this could be a variety of things. Again, we could be talking about architectural drawings. We could be talking about structural engineering drawings. Again, it just depends on what your proposal is and whatever is going to best communicate what your idea is going to be. Sometimes artists make models, sometimes artists do digital renderings, sometimes they'll do hand-drawn renderings. It really just depends on whatever is the best thing to communicate your work. Budget, here we're getting into really specifics, or specific information. You'll have bids, you'll have contracts with subcontractors who are providing services for you to help execute your project. You're really, really getting into the weeds and securing those numbers and those materials so that when we say, yes, you can do this design, please go forward, those numbers aren't going to change drastically on you. And of course, there's some contingency built into all of that because you can't control everything, but you want to do your research up front so that you feel confident as an artist that you can pull off the design that you've made within the budget that you've been allotted. And then I mentioned before an installation plan, of course, we'll be coordinating closely with a general contractor if it's an integrated project. Sometimes our projects are not, and so we can kind of operate on our own schedule, but there's still a plan and there's still a schedule for the completion of the work. And then we also asked artists to submit a very detailed maintenance plan so that we know all the materials that were used, how it was made, so going forward we know the best way to take care of it. And of course, as we go forward, we always involve the artist as much as we can, but if it's 20 years down the road, we still want that accurate record of the materials so that we can take care of it properly. And then I've already mentioned being mindful of the schedule. Now that's not just the schedule for the construction project, but that's your schedule, and being mindful of what you're able to do and what you're able to meet, and just being in really close communication with your project manager. And then also being mindful of the presentations you'll need to make. I've mentioned a few times now for our program, it's the Art and Public Places panel as well as the Arts Commission, but there may be a number of community meetings that we'd like you to present at, so just being mindful of that and building that into your project scope and schedule. Okay, so this is kind of the last little bit of it. I just wanted to share some resources with you. And I have this handy artist resource guide you may have seen before. It lives on our website, so you can see it there. We're currently working on the latest version, but I do have some extra copies here if any of y'all would like to take it. We just go into a lot of detail about everything that I just kind of touched upon now, but also more detail as you get a commission. So we hope that that's a good resource for you. And then just a few others. I mentioned the Cultural Arts Division website. You can see more about what we're up to. You can also learn more about the Cultural Funding Program, which you all may be familiar with, and see when those opportunities come available. Also learn about other planning efforts that we're involved in, and whenever we have meetings and workshops that we offer to the artistic community here in Austin. So please check it out there. Publicartist.org, again, is the online application system that we use. Another common one that you may have heard of is callforentry.org. Again, these are just platforms that allow you to submit your application online. Much better than when I started in public art and we'd look at hundreds and hundreds of slides. I'll never forget the one time I dropped a slide tray right before going into a meeting, and oh my gosh, so I'm really glad I don't have to do that anymore. Public Art Archive is where our collection lives online, so you can go and check out everything we've got in our collection, but also there are a large number of public art collections from around the country that are also on Public Art Archive. So it's a great way just to kind of see what people are doing and see what's out there, so I encourage you to check that out. And then Americans for the Arts, which is a national arts advocacy organization. They have the Public Art Network, which is a really great resource. Their website has a lot of information about standard contracts, standard selection process procedures, anything you want to know about the public art field. They have a bunch of resources there. They also do a annual year in review, which is a survey of some of the best projects, public art projects around the country. So you can search that database and again see what's going on in the country. And this past year we won 3 of them, so we are very excited about that. And Public Art Review is a magazine, a publication by Forecast Public Art, and again, a really great resource to see what people are up to here, interviews by artists, arts administrators. Again, just a really great resource to kind of get your mind going and thinking creatively. And then just a few resources here in town. These are other agencies that offer support to artists, but also offer funding. So as I mentioned early in the presentation, there are a lot of different ways to realize your artwork. You don't have to go through a public art program if that's not your cup of tea. So these are some other resources that might help you to realize your proposal for artwork. And I believe, I'll just mention the neighborhood partnering program is something through the city's public works department, and it's again another way to work with your community to realize an art project. We see a number of art projects come through that program. And that's all I've got for you. I know I covered a lot. Hopefully there was some useful information in there for you, but I'd like to open up now to any questions that you all might have. Sure, in the back. Yes, it will be online, and we're also recording it as well. So the presentation as well as the PowerPoint will be available online. Good question. Anyone else? Yes.
What's the average time scale for one of these projects?
Ooh, that's a great question. So the average public art project, permanent public art project, I would say at a minimum 2 years. We've seen projects take 10 years. And it really is just dependent upon the larger construction project. So for example, a project that took 10 years was a streetscape project, and it was covered several blocks. There were a lot of things that were found as they dug up the streetscape that caused delays. We don't have any control over that, so we just have to kind of roll with the punches, and sometimes we have to store artwork, sometimes we'll delay making the artwork if we know there's already a delay in the construction, but generally, I'd say closer to the 2 to 3 year mark, but it can take a long time. Now, for, say, our temporary installation program, Tempo, those are much quicker. Those are, within a few months that they're installed and up. So it kind of depends on what it is, but public art projects in general take a very long time. Thank you. Anyone else? Yes, in the back.
I wanted to ask you specifically about the budget,
Mm-hmm.
the wayfinding project.
Sure.
Over budget. I just remembered it from city council. Can you just share what the artist's role is when
Right. Well, in this case, they didn't actually go over budget. What we asked them to do was expand their scope of work. So as we were working on the project and developing it, they created it's a mobile website, and it's sort of like a choose your own adventure experience through downtown Austin. And so as we were developing that, we as a program decided, we really want to expand it here, here, and here. This is a funding source that we have available to us, and this is why we want to do that. And so we went to the artists and actually asked them to expand their scope of work, and then we worked with them to see, how that would all fit and what that would really cost. And then we had to go through the approval to get the approval to spend that money, but then also to amend their contract, and that's why we were going back for those approvals. But to your question specifically, typically our budgets are finite. We have a particular allocation, and that's all that we have to spend. So we try very, very hard in the very beginning to work with the artist to develop a budget that is reasonable, so that when you get into fabrication and you get into making the work, you're not going to blow your budget, because at the end of the day, it's going to be your responsibility to make that fit. Now, I did mention that we build in contingency. We ask the artist to do that as well as us. We build that as well. So there's some wiggle room there, because you can't plan for everything. So in those cases, we can increase the budget to accommodate things that you just couldn't plan for. But the general rule of thumb is, with a permanent public art commission, that budget is finite, and you have to work within those parameters.
And then lastly, I just have a second question. Creative works in general, not necessarily public art.
Mhm.
But can you just tell me, because I'm paying attention to the budget hearings, is there anything related to writing or creative writing or anything that you're aware of from the cultural arts perspective?
Yeah, I would look to our cultural funding program. There are a number of different types of grants that you can apply for that are not specific to visual art and not specific to public art. They fund all types of disciplines. So I would look to that program. There are a number of different grant opportunities through the cultural funding program. Yes, thank you. Yes.
And at the very beginning, you mentioned one of the bubbles or blocks or something said residencies.
Yes.
What is meant by that for the city?
Great question. So artist residencies are something that we are currently exploring more. And the way we've been able to do it, I'll give an example. We recently hired 2 artists, one to complete a short residency with the fire department, and one to complete a residency with the emergency medical services department. So in both cases actually, each department was renovating stations. And so because those are construction projects, we get our 2%, but because they were renovations, they weren't new construction, the 2% was relatively small. So we worked with the department, pooled all those together and said, okay, why don't we have an artist spend time at all of these stations and develop work based on that residency for each station. And so we worked with the department to kind of develop those parameters. We did the same thing with the EMS department. And so we created, in a sense, a residency. Now it's slightly different than what you typically think of. You're not going to a beautiful place in Maine all by yourself and creating work for 3 weeks, but you're able to take more time to get to know not only the department staff, but also get to know the space itself. And no. Yes. Although that would be very interesting, but no, you're not living there. Yeah. And so in those 2 cases, the real trick was the scheduling of it all. There are a number of shifts that go through the fire station and go through the EMS stations, and wanting to capture all those people, but also not wanting the artist to have to work at 3 a.m. either. So again, it was really kind of a special case, but it was a type of opportunity that we as a program are really interested in exploring. And it also enabled us to commission artists who hadn't had public art commissions before and who primarily work in 2D. So we hired a painter and a photographer. And so we're able to expand our collection by including artists that we don't typically work with, because usually we're outside. And then also offer a different type of opportunity that allow the artist to really get to know a department And again, I think in those two cases, it's really applicable because there isn't a lot of public interaction at the facility itself. A lot of times these people are going out into the community, and that's where the interaction is, not really at the facility. So allowing an artist to really see and experience that helps to inform what they propose. So does that answer your question?
Well, yes, particularly my question was about the definition, the city's definition of residency,
Mhm.
because it's very different than.
It is different, absolutely. Absolutely. We are also working on a new pilot program where we are trying to place artists within a department for a significant amount of time. So that type of opportunity is a little bit more what you're thinking about, where although you're not going to live at a city office, but you would be spending a significant amount of time in a singular space, really getting to know a department and getting to know their operations. And so, it's along the same vein, but a little bit different structure, but still kind of in with that city framework where it is different than your traditional artist residency that you might apply for. Any other questions? Is it good? Yes.
When it comes to putting together slides for your request for qualifications or whatever, let's say if you're a painter and you have a lot of figures, is there certain content that you should be aware of and try to avoid putting in there? Like, if you do a lot of figures and some of them are half nudes or anything like that,
Mm-hmm.
could you try to edit those out?
It's not a requirement that we have. I would say edit your work so that it is applicable to that particular project, and showing your best face and really explaining your work. Our selection process, which I think is actually really great, we have people who are well versed in art and design and are used to looking at images and making that leap, thinking, how could this artist, make this project happen? And so they have that level of expertise to do that. We're not having a public meeting where we're showing photographs. If that was the case, then yes, we would say you probably should edit your work because we're in a public setting. But the selection process is not that. I think, again, it really comes down to what is the best way to showcase your work in a tasteful manner, but expressing what your style is. I mean, that's what we're looking for. We want to know who you are as an artist. Very good. Yes.
If you work for a different department in the city, are you eligible to apply for some of these?
Typically, no. Yes, yeah, and we've gotten that question quite a bit. And actually, I'm going to take a second to introduce Sue Lamb. She's our program administrator. And Sue, please feel free to jump in if I need to, or if I misrepresent or something. But that is typically the case, that city employees are not eligible for our project, as well as employees of the architectural firm that's working on the project, or other sub-consultants that might be working on the project. Yeah. Any other questions?
What is tempo?
Tempo. It's just our name for our temporary installation program. So this is a way for artists who are new to the field to go through the public art process, but they're only creating something temporary. So it's a little less rigorous, and it's a way for us to activate space in a different way. As I mentioned, some public art projects can take a very long time, but with Tempo, it's a much quicker turnaround. Our application for the next cycle for next year is coming out relatively soon, so keep your eye out for that. But it's something that we can go through much more quickly. They're smaller commissions; they're under 10,000, and we currently have a few up in the city. Again, those are listed on our website. We've got a few more coming up later this year, so you're welcome to go check those out and see what we're commissioning. Good. And there's another question. Yes.
I was going to ask, what's the minimum and max budget that you can expect for one of the projects, and is there a better chance of getting selected if your project costs less to do than something that costs more to do?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So minimum, maximum budget. We have a 2% policy, so it's 2% of the construction budget So it's going to be whatever that is, and that is really out of our control. But I would say in general, for the permanent commissions, it would be anywhere from $30,000 to we have a $2 million project out at the airport that we're working on. That's a wide range. I would say the vast majority of projects are around $300,000 or less. But it really depends on what the construction project is. Now, to your question about essentially, coming in under bid is kind of the angle that you're asking. We don't really operate that way. So we come at it from the other direction. So we have a finite budget and we design to that budget. We would prefer that we make use of that full budget and really get the most artwork out of it. So if we have a $100,000 budget, we want to create a project that's going to use all of that so that we have the most amount of impact that we can. Does that make sense? So we're kind of coming at it from the other direction as opposed to saying, oh, well, I can do it cheaper. We would say, well, if you have money left over, let's do more art, and let's maximize that budget. Yes?
So would the same apply for the tempo projects?
Now with the tempo projects, again, we have a finite budget. It's $10,000 or less. What we're asking you to do is come in with whatever your budget is. We don't weigh, oh, this one's cheaper, so let's do this one. We're not looking at it in that way, but we do give you the flexibility to say, how much do you need within $10,000, and you come up with that budget. We commission, any number of budgets within that $10,000 parameter. Does that make sense? Okay, good. Any other questions? These are really great questions. Okay. All right. Well, let's wrap that up. Thank you very much. I'll be hanging around if you have any other thoughts, and please feel free to contact me if you think of something later. But thanks for coming. Hopefully you got some good information. Thank you.